Welcome back to Buck Sexton Show. It's starting to happen here again in New York City. I remember seeing it a lot more when I was a kid. People who, in our subway system, which is very effective at getting you places, but charmless. It's not nice. Those of you who haven't been to New York, I can tell you it's. And you see some stuff on our subway. You see some things happen, and that's just always been the way. You go to other cities. I mean, you go to the D.C. subway system, and it's like a Disney park amusement ride in comparison. It's so clean, and everything seems. I know they've had problems with track fires, but it seems like everything is much nicer in the D.C. subway system, which serves a much smaller number of people. But here in New York, we kind of like our gritty subway. Gets us where we need to go for under $3. You can travel all the way from way up in the Bronx all the way out to Far Rockaway in Queens, which, I mean, producer Mark, how many miles is that? That's a long way, right? I don't know. I mean, it'd probably take you over an hour on the subway, but I mean,
Yeah, hour and a half.
hour and a half, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can get across the city in that little amount of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, it can get you far. So the subway's pretty impressive here. There's a problem, though, and I've been seeing this more recently. In fact, I just saw it right here at our subway stop near where we do this show, where you see people now who they walk up to the turnstiles and they just hop right over, just not paying the fare anymore. So, all right, well, let's if we can take a look at what this is leading to, what's going on here. NYPD is getting, because there's cameras in a lot of these subways too, so they see this. NYPD is getting reports of people. It's called fare evasion. And they will make arrests based on this. Because some of us, like me here in New York City, remember that you had these small crimes that would happen and nobody would do anything about them. This is broken windows theory. You've probably heard of this, broken windows theory, where when a window is broken in a building, it's more likely that if it's left that way, other windows will be broken, and then all of a sudden the whole place is burnt out in a slum and bad things happen. In New York, that was the feeling on the streets when I was growing up here, and it was almost 3,000 murders a year in 1993. I think it was 27 or 2,800. And now we're down to under 300 murders. So you're talking about a 90% drop in homicides, which is a big deal. 90% drop in homicides. But you had graffiti everywhere. Graffiti was a scourge in the city. There's graffiti all over the place. And there were people constantly doing petty crimes. Fare evasion was a major one. And what they found was that by enforcing laws, not only were you helping quality of life in these areas, but by enforcing smaller laws, you came into contact with people who were more likely to be wanted for other bigger issues. This is just the way it was. And I was in the NYPD in the intelligence division as a civilian counterterrorism analyst for 18 months, so I had some familiarity with how all this stuff worked. And the guys, the old sergeants and detectives who've been on the job a long time and were here back in the 90s doing this stuff said, the guy who, sometimes you grab a guy for a fare evasion and it turns out that he's wanted on an attempted murder charge when you run his biographical data in the system. So now you have people that are increasingly doing this fare evasion thing. I've seen it. I've seen people just walk right past me, hop over, and they don't pay and they go on. So they're stealing, $2.75 from a city. Look, it's not a horrible felony. I'm not pretending like people that do this should be locked up forever or anything. I mean, I've almost once or twice absentmindedly walked through the gate the wrong way when a gate will be open near the subway. So look, I mean, things can happen. But these people are doing this intentionally. It's bad. So what the NYPD has done is they've set up more cops in places where there's fare evasion happening, and they're trying to make arrests. Well, guess what? There is a disrespect for police that is growing, particularly here in New York City, but it's in a lot of urban centers across the country, a disrespect for police and this gotcha game trying to get cops on video who are being rough with suspects. And I don't mean abusing them. I just mean having to, watching a cop wrestle someone to the ground and put cuffs on him is a violent thing. And if you make the police do that, people get bumps, bruises, things happen. It's not nice. Which is why when an officer says you are under arrest, the proper response is to put your hands behind your back as instructed, deal with it in court. The proper response is not, I'm not getting arrested. Now, this reminds me of the whole Eric Garner situation. Eric Garner, whose family's been paid millions of dollars because he was killed during a a routine arrest for a very minor issue of selling loose cigarettes. I understand it's a minor issue, but it's still an offense you can be arrested for. And the real problem, the initiating event was a very large man saying that he wasn't getting arrested today. Once that happened, once the cops say you're under arrest and you say, no, I'm not, now you are challenging their authority and force is coming. Because behind every police decision, behind every police arrest is the threat of force. It's the same threat of force, by the way, that exists when people say that they want to raise your taxes and you say, well, I don't want to pay them. Keep in mind, they will send men with guns to your home to arrest you if you don't pay your taxes. So there's a threat of force behind all of these things. So in the Eric Garner case, he had a heart condition. He grabbed him around the neck. Guy fell down. He went into cardiac arrest, died. And this was viewed as terrible police abuse. I think it was a very unfortunate situation, but you're not allowed to say I'm not getting arrested today. That hasn't changed. And there are people that are being grabbed by these police, these NYPD units, for fare evasion, and they're just trying to escape. They don't want to get arrested for this, and they're saying they're not going to get arrested. And then you have audio that we can play for you here of people protesting the NYPD in response to this. Just madness. Play clip 2, please.
You know what terrifies?
Police brutality, systematic racism, colonial mindsets. Like, what's the confusion?
We're marching out here to protest NYPD violence, both in the subway and on the streets. The police are modern-day slave catchers, and they're going around the city beating and killing people, and we're out here to say we have enough of that.
What a horrible slander of the NYPD, which I would also like to note for all of you is a very diverse police department. Takes a lot of pride in being a very diverse police department. One of the advantages the NYPD had, even in the world of counterterrorism, was you could pretty much find somebody who was a uniformed officer of the NYPD who spoke any dialect of any language in the world fluently. Not every single one, but pretty close. And for them to say these, for these protesters to say these things, and there's more than this too. There are videos that have gone viral of the NYPD trying to make arrests, and crowds gather around them and are rooting against the police and are yelling at the police are racist, and people are resisting arrests, assaulting police. They're making videos of this. This is disconcerting because this can lead to really frightening incidents, and this could lead to a lethal force situation. And these stories about a racist police department, when that's told, and it's told by leftists and activists and anti-police groups in particular, but when that is told, that has ramifications for safety in neighborhoods across the city. It has ramifications because this is the largest city in America at the national level too. Do we respect our police? Do we like our law enforcement officers in this country by and large? Do we appreciate the job they do? The answers to those questions are very important. And the intersectional, race-obsessed left dabbles far too much in police hatred, and particularly around the issue of claiming that law enforcement is inherently and systematically racist. They love to say this. The left loves to claim that police departments are racist. And to this, I would just say, we went through this in New York before, where any police action was always under tremendous scrutiny, where there was a lack of communication and a lack of respect shown to local law enforcement predominantly in minority communities. And there was a bloodbath on the streets. I mean, there was just far too much violence going on. And after a while, people here in New York everyone started to say, we just want safe streets. We want our wives and mothers to be able to walk to the store without being attacked. We want our kids to be able to go to school without being mugged or robbed. Do what you have to do to get us there. And we went through that. I'm worried now that after years of declining crime in this city and in other places too, where there's been declining crime, the old liberal mentality of enforcing the law is often racist. Enforcing laws that on its face, there's nothing wrong with the law, right? Fare evasion is not a racist crime, right? It's not a crime of race. Are you paying, whoever you are, whatever race you are you paying the fare or not? But the left will say, oh, but when you look at disproportionate impact on different communities. Then it becomes a racial issue. When you look at disproportionate impact of all kinds of different criminal justice initiatives, it's an issue. And so police all of a sudden are the bad guys for enforcing the laws. And you're seeing more of this. You're seeing an increase in this. And there's also been these videos of trashing police cars, throwing actual trash cans or trash bags on them here in New York. And I find this not just despicable, but also really troubling. I think people have forgotten what it's like in a lot of places, in New York, in Los Angeles, perhaps in parts of San Francisco, forgotten that, we don't have to generally think about our day-to-day safety in these major cities in most of the neighborhoods that you live in. It's not true in some parts of Chicago. It's not true in some parts of Baltimore. But in a lot of major cities, safety is of minor concern day to day. That wasn't always the case. And we have law enforcement to thank for that. And we have a police force across the board in this country that is overwhelmingly of us, meaning these are our people who live in our communities. That's the thing with the NYPD. These guys all live here. They got families here. They all want safe streets too. The NYPD doesn't go back to some police barracks at the end of the day where they're plotting ways to make our lives miserable. And they got wives, they've got kids, they've got husbands. They're just trying to do their jobs and keep the streets safe. But you'll notice there's far too much of a willingness on the left. There's far too much of a home for real open disrespect for police and for law enforcement. And they've never really come to grips with this. And it's in part because the intersectional obsession with dividing us by race often turns into or becomes an issue of police enforcement of the law and police violence. We need to support law enforcement when they're doing the job that they're supposed to do. And that means sometimes that for relatively minor crimes, you're going to get arrested. You're going to get arrested. People know they shouldn't do this. We've decided the duly constituted authorities who can make things like fair evasion illegal have said you can't do it. And if you choose to break that law, you're going to have to pay the price. And I'm not getting arrested today, or I don't feel like getting arrested for this, is not an option. That is an invitation to anarchy. That is an invitation to the nullification of far more laws. Deeply troubling stuff.
And that when we talk about the Green New Deal or global migration compact, it's not out of self-interest. It is because as one of the world's largest polluters, we have a responsibility to the world to address the existential threat that is of climate change.
Ilhan Omar is verbalizing here an increasingly widespread sentiment among the Democrat left in this country. When can we just start calling them socialists? Commies is obviously a bit of a pejorative, though it's fun to call them commies. They're technically not communists because they don't advocate for a revolutionary dictatorship of a central committee that is in place of a legislature. And, so there's, okay, fine. It's not really fair to say that the Democrats are commies, but they're getting pretty close. Definitely socialists. But the framing here of the issue that Ilhan Omar gives you is very interesting. She says that because we're a polluter, we have a responsibility to the rest of the world. Now, is anyone going to hold China or India responsible for their polluting? Of course not. But in this country, we're told, well, we are. And I would note that they've conflated CO2 with pollution. CO2 is not a pollutant. They've now convinced courts, and they've now created this whole line of thinking that CO2 in excess becomes a pollutant. CO2 is less than 1% of the atmosphere. This stuff that they are promoting with treating CO2 like it's the same as poison in your water is insane. I mean, CO2 is what plants need for photosynthesis. They take in CO2, they release oxygen. And Ilhan Omar, though, is setting the groundwork here. And she's not the only one. AOC and many others in the Green New Deal, they want America to start paying the rest of the world for the progress that America has made because of fossil fuels. We are supposed to pay environmental reparations to the rest of the world. This is the beginning of this movement. Environmental reparations, meaning that we have to subsidize developing countries that have not been able to, utilize technology, industry, and just commercial processes as effectively as we have to become as wealthy as we are. So we're going to just start sending. They're going to take money from you. You're the taxpayer. The money only comes from you. Right? The government has no money. It only has your money. They're going to start taking that and redistributing it to the world. This is a global Marxist scheme. And they're speaking about it openly. And notice another thing about the Green New Deal. You know that the whistleblower situation is garbage because when you have people like Adam Schiff as your standard bearer, that's really all you have to know. Notice how the Green New Deal, the members of Congress who are promoting it are the furthest to the left, the least economically literate. I mean, the least understanding of basic economics, the least judgment on how to promote growth and prosperity in an economy. The worst judgment, I should say, on how to do those things. Those are the members of Congress who are the most behind this. You have to pay attention to that. That matters. That's not an accident. It's not out of nowhere that the people that are saying, let's do the Green New Deal, are the people that you would least want to hire for your private sector company as any kind of productive employee. I thought this was interesting as well. Omar and the imbalance of power dynamic. Please play 21.
Bernie knows what Minnesotans know, that in the root of every injustice is an imbalance of power, whether through gender, association, corruption, wealth, or race. The ability to wield control over another is basis of injustice.
But the ability to wield power over somebody else is not always a function of gender or race or sexual orientation. This is what the left doesn't seem to understand. That it is, in fact, often people running a government apparatus who look and sound and speak very much the same way as the people that they are oppressing. That can happen too. That the problem is actually the mechanism of government power that violates individual rights, individual dignity. That's where a lot of oppression comes from. But she was giving you essentially a working definition of intersectionality, which has become yet another obsession on the left. Intersectionality is the basis for so much of the far left's thinking on issues ranging from climate to healthcare to really everything now. And it just means that they view, and whatever the issue is, it can never just be what's good for people. It's always, what does this mean for this group? What does it mean for that group? Who is being elevated? Who is being suppressed? It's a dizzying and ultimately just worthless exercise, but that is what they want to do with every government policy, put it in the framework of intersectionality.
So he seems to have made it up. This is par for the course from the president, but we shouldn't get used to this. You know, we teach our children to tell the truth, and we teach our children that the president is supposed to tell the truth. So even when the United States is celebrating a major military victory, I think we should still hold the bar as high as possible for the president of the United States. You know, Stephanie Grisham, the White House press secretary, took issue with the New York Times reporting and said here, is it not possible just to celebrate that a terrorist, murderer, and rapist has been killed? Yes, of course. I think it's been very clear for a week there's been a celebration that al-Baghdadi is dead. But it is also possible to expect the president to tell the truth. And for now, it seems the Republican Party is okay with him spinning up these stories, even about U.S. military action.
Well, it's really important, Brian Stelter wants you to know, it's really important that when you're talking about the death of the most wanted terrorist mastermind in the world, an evildoer, a murderer, rapist, it's very important that all the details are exactly correct, or else we should really just focus on how the president's a bad guy.
Can't believe it, but I guess I should. Here we are, being lectured by Brian Stelter, who it's still a shock to anybody with any knowledge of television skills, personality, and all the rest of it, that this guy has a show anywhere, never mind at CNN, and he is trying to tell us that it's normal that there's this focus at CNN that Trump said that Baghdadi died, whimpering like a dog, which there was always that initial complaint too. They had Lawrence Tribe at Harvard University, the professor emeritus at Harvard Law School, saying that this proved that Trump, and he was being serious, Trump has some hostility to dogs. So the stupid meter goes off the charts with Democrats on a whole bunch of things when it comes to Trump. We know that. That's just a statement of the obvious. But okay, so if Trump was if he was using his intuition that Baghdadi running down a dark, passageway with bringing children with him with a suicide vest on, being chased by a highly trained Belgian Malinois, which I'm assuming is how the situation played out. I don't even really know. And that Baghdadi was, whimpering and crying about it. Okay, well, can the New York Times prove, or can Brian Stelter prove that he didn't? They really want to fact check this one. But this is what I mean. There's a pretending among the media. There's a pretending that there is that they have no sophisticated understanding of storytelling or the English language or how normal people speak. Whenever Trump says something, even if he's kind of kidding or if it's sarcastic, if there's a joke, they go, "Did you hear what Trump said?" Because they'd rather look stupid to intelligent people than take an intelligent position and upset stupid people. This is how the Democrats in the media approach their work, right? It's better to feign idiocy so that you can appeal to the left-wing base than to admit that you understand what the president was doing, or you give the benefit of the doubt on something where it just doesn't really matter. And they're looking for this corroboration of President Trump saying that Baghdadi looked like a dog. I mean, died like a dog. And the truth is, Baghdadi is a bad guy, and Trump got him. And ultimately, you sit here, you say, what is this all about? With the media saying that, oh, he didn't do this or he didn't do that. They're really that worried about such a minor detail. But this is like the 2 scoops thing. Remember when Trump had 2 scoops of ice cream and everybody else got one at the White House? That was a news story. There's nothing that's too little, too petty for these people to focus on, which is one of the reasons why I think for those of us who pay attention, it's so hard to take them seriously. I mean, here's Brian Stelter getting all upset about Trump's spelling on Twitter. Play it.
Everybody makes spelling mistakes, all right? Everybody does. I do, everybody does. But on Twitter, Donald Trump makes a lot more of them than most people. Just this week, he misspelled Republican and unfair. But those are hardly the worst examples. We have seen countless absurd spellings from the commander-in-chief. He has called showbiz shoebiz. There's hamburgers. There's the smocking gun. There's a lot of these, even misspelling his wife Melania's name.
Who cares? They're typos. The guy's a boomer, and he's, his fingers maybe sometimes get a little bit sloppy on the smartphone or whatever. Who cares? But what is this? How is there a focus on this? This guy's got his own show on CNN. There's so many important things to talk about. They focus on this, though. Why? Because it's just another thing about, Trump is bad, Trump can't spell, Trump is evil. I just wonder if they ever get bored of this. I think the answer is probably not, but it is disconcerting to me that they just can't help themselves. They'll dig into any bit of anti-Trump minutia. By the way, also, Christine Blasey Ford, I just wanted to get this in today because I'm angry at the journalists talk about pretending to be stupid. They pretended to be very stupid when Blasey Ford was the most important anti-Kavanaugh voice out there, trying to defend the activist bent of the activist left-wing bent of the Supreme Court, because the left has been able to rely on the Supreme Court for decades to hand them victories they never could have gotten through the legislative process. And Blasey Ford, we were told that she had nothing to gain from this. And people like me were saying, you're joking, right? I mean, she's going to have a book deal, she's going to cover magazines, going to be a hero, tenured professor at whatever school she wants, or some even better than a tenured professor, some cushy administrative position. She's going to be hooked up, as they say. They're going to give her all kinds of goodies and great things because she's a warrior for the left, an ideological warrior for their cause. Now, you can argue about whether or not that she was doing the right thing by trying to destroy a man's character and, assassinate his entire reputation just to protect Roe v. Wade. I think that it's the most heinous and disgusting thing I've ever seen in politics. Some people would, on the left, of course, would say, oh, but it was worth it. But just put that aside for a second. Can we at least all agree that a normal, intelligent take on this would be that Christine Blasey Ford clearly had reason, ideological and professional and financial benefit that would come from being the would-be weapon of Kavanaugh's Supreme Court destruction or Supreme Court nomination destruction. And now here she is talking about, well, here, we can hear from Christine Blasey Ford. Play clip 3.
I was inspired by Anita Hill when I was deciding whether to testify, but it didn't occur to me at the time that I would be inspiring anyone else. I was focused on telling the U.S. Senate what had happened to me. I simply thought that it was my duty as a citizen and that anyone in my position would do the same thing.
That's going to be the narrative that HBO makes into a movie. Just give it 5 or 10 years. Just like they did with Anita Hill. Just give it 5 or 10 years, and the story's not going to be. This is the problem that we have in dealing with the left, the cultural dominance that they're able to still bring to bear in Hollywood and the creative realms. Blasey Ford will be played. Mark my words. It'll take a while. Hopefully I'll still be on the radio doing the show. Give it 5 years. They will have the most appealing Hollywood actress. Are we not supposed to say actress anymore? Is it now just everyone's an actor? I forget. Whatever. The most appealing Hollywood actress possible, playing her in a role that will lionize her for all eternity. But they pretended like this was unknowable, that no serious person would have thought that Blasey Ford had anything to gain from doing this. I do think there's one aspect of the Blasey Ford story that is really, really important and very helpful, and that is that it is the example we should all remember of what is not credible accusation, what is not being credibly accused. Here was a very high-level accusation, and it's all the way to the United States Senate with tens of millions of people watching at home on TV. And if what she did was considered a credible accusation, then everything is a credible accusation, which means that it was not credible. And to call it anything other than, in fact, not credible is doing a disservice to the truth. The journalists are also on this. But have you ever heard a journalist apologize for being wrong on this or being so ideologically driven that he or she couldn't report on the facts objectively? Of course not. It was all about the cause, my friends. It was all about the purpose of Blasey Ford, not the truth of the underlying allegations. That never really mattered to anyone. That never had anything to do with anything.
It's time for roll call.
All right, Matthew writes into roll call here. Oh, remember, it's facebook.com/Buck Sexton or teambuck@iHeartMedia.com. We hope you're enjoying the Pluto video stream. If you haven't checked it out yet, just download. It's totally free, no subscription, no nothing. The Pluto TV app, channel 248, and you can watch the Buck Sexton show, the Jesse Kelly show. More amazing content in 2020 going to be joining our lineup too. We can't get into too much of that right now, but we got good things coming. But, I mean, all you really need is Buck Sexton and Jesse Kelly. You'll know everything you need to know about the day, and you can watch us doing our respective shows as you can. So, yeah, man, that's good thing. Good things there. And also, please continue to spread the word about the podcast. The biggest help you could give. Some people are saying, Buck, how can I help? The biggest way you could help the Buck Sexton show would be to get some new person in your life to just start downloading this on iTunes. Just start listening to the show on iTunes. Tell one person, they start listening. If everybody listening now did that, we'd be one of the, probably one of the top, certainly in the top 20 or 30 podcasts for politics out there. So please get people to listen to the Buck Sexton show and tell them about it. All right. Matthew writes, Democrats need to go back to preschool to learn. That's where we learned about the story of the ant and the grasshopper. The ant and the grasshopper were hard at work, and they saved, were the ant and the grasshopper, rather. Well, I don't know what this is. And the story of the little red hen. There was a time in my life I chose not to work hard. I worked enough to survive, and I was happy with my simple life. And there's some parts of my life that I was happy because I worked my butt off, and I was able to live more luxuriously. Yeah, Matthew, I mean, people don't like to be told about cause and effect. They don't like to be told that our decisions matter. It's far preferable for many people to think that there's some invisible force that's blocking them from achieving what they should achieve, or that there's some other problem out there. I'm just, this is one of the things that Democrats do. Structural misogyny, structural racism, structural class oppression, all of this. Meanwhile, we've created a society where there's more possibility for upward mobility than anything in the history of the world before it. We never really get much credit for that. By the way, Dennis Prager was on. He was on Bill Maher the weekend. Dennis Prager came ready to roll. I was impressed. Bruce and Mark, it's worth you checking it out if you haven't seen it, man. Dennis Prager showed up, and he was not. I'd never seen him in that mode. He was like cracking knuckles and cracking skulls. It's pretty good. Let's see here. Todd. I've noticed the liberal media articles refer to President Trump as Mr. Trump. Well, Todd, I certainly can believe it. That's happening. I don't know off the top of my head if that seems to be happening in major publications a lot, like the New York Times or Washington Post, but I would have to check it out. But thank you so much. Alex writes in, why do liberals dominate the media and academia? Do they just have some predisposition toward opportunities allowing them to indoctrinate people? Keep up the great work. Alex, it's a very good question, and there's not an easy or ready answer to it. Why do liberals dominate the media academy? One is because they operate in those realms like it's a country club. And so once liberals get inside the organization, they feel ideologically compelled and justified in pushing out anybody who's not like them. It doesn't share their belief system. And so in that way, this is, I forget whose law this is. It's not really a law, but whose maxim that any organization that is not explicitly right-wing will become left-wing. It's generally true. Any organization that grows over time will have politics, and they will be dominated by the left unless the place is kept as a conservative bastion. But do liberals want to indoctrinate the youth? Yeah, I think that they feel very passionately about liberals insist that everybody else think what they think. Conservatives are happy to just know what is true and live their lives in peace. That's a big difference between the general mindset of the two sides. Matt, hey Buck, are we at a point where one's politics as an adult are determined by those of the teachers or professors in our last years of school? It's obvious we conservatives are contradicting the leftist orthodoxy most of those in Foggy Bottom, Langley, and the Hoover Building were taught. Shields high. Are we at a point where determined by those teachers' last years of school? I'm not really clear, Matt, on how you're framing the question here, but I can just say that, there's a lot of indoctrination that goes on in the academy, starting at a very young age in schools, and then in government. A lot of people that are drawn to government work tend to have a more left of center mindset. They think the government does good things. They think the government is something that should be more involved, not less involved in people's lives. They believe in the mission. Generally going to work for the federal bureaucracy, you don't have people that have a tremendous amount of personal ambition. There's more of a mission ambition, I guess you could say. They want to be a part of something bigger, but they're not looking to be famous or rich or change the game. You wouldn't go to the federal government. It's one of the reasons why I left the federal government. I wanted to do more stuff that was stuff for me. Sue, listen every night. Glad you're on more shows live. Your opinion means a lot to me. I tell all my friends to listen to your podcasts. I live in Western Massachusetts. It's hard to talk to anyone here. Don't know friend from foe. Well, Sue, thank you, and thank you so much for doing what you can to help the show grow. It means a lot, and we are always there for you. We are your friends. Whether you're in Western Mass or anywhere else in the country, you can count on Team Buck to be there with you. Hold on. Let's see this. Travis writes a long one here. Hold on. Travis, I don't have time for this one, but I will read it. It looks like he wrote quite a bit, so I won't be able to get to it. Nathaniel, hey, Buck, why do liberals want to suppress speech, especially political ads? Because our freedom-loving president wields speech better than they do. He exercises his First Amendment rights to their constant detriment. Oh, my friend, we need to keep the petty dictators off our lawn. Shields high. Nathaniel, Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for writing in, but I will repeat myself. Shields high.